Welcome back for part 3 of our election of 1824. So if you'll remember, nobody's won a majority of the Electoral College votes. So what happens? Do we panic? Do we run around in the streets? Do we crawl under our beds and cry? No, because the Founding Fathers had a pretty brilliant idea of what to do. And that's a contingent election. And that's where the House of Representatives elect the president. Now, in the Electoral College, as you might remember from part 2, each state gets 2 senators and a minimum of 1 representative for their congressional districts. So that's how come you'll have Oregon with 7 electoral votes, Washington with 12, California with 65, because of different population sizes. Well, that all changes when the contingent election happens in the House of Representatives. Each state gets only 1 vote. So even though California has 63 congressional districts, Oregon has 5, and Washington has 10, each state just gets 1 vote. So the contingent from each state has to come to a consensus. Now, that might be pretty easy in Oregon, where you have 4 out of the 5 representatives are Democrats. They can pretty much override the 1 Republican. So it would seem likely that in a contingent election now, Oregon would cast their vote for the Democrat. But that's not the case everywhere. But that's how it works. But so we have 1 vote. And so all you need is the most states voting for you in a contingent election. And boy, the election is in the House, and it's wild and crazy. All sorts of things are happening leading up to that contingent election, all sorts of accusations and mudslinging, and it's just gruesome. So put on your tinfoil conspiracy hats and let's look at what people said. First of all, we have Speaker of the House, Representative Henry Clay. He withdraws from running as president. So now we're down to the 3 men, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, and William Crawford. Jackson, who's won a plurality of the popular vote and Electoral College, but not the all-important majority that he needs, thinks that he's about to win the election because, well, he got the most votes out of anybody. But Speaker Clay controls the House of Representatives and therefore can control the voting, it would seem. And in the end, Adams wins 13 states, Andrew Jackson 7, and poor William Crawford only 4. And shortly after that, Adams appoints Representative Clay as his Secretary of State. Does that seem a little suspicious? Well, let's take off the tinfoil and let's put on your thinking hats. First of all, Speaker Clay is not fond of populist candidates like Andrew Jackson. He thinks that a candidate should be educated and part of the political structure like he is, like John Quincy Adams. And so that's where this comes in. You know, he naturally favors John Quincy Adams. And as Speaker of the House of Representatives, he does have influence and sway over people and how they vote, just like Representative Nancy Pelosi would have today or any other Speaker of the House. They hold a lot of power as the Speaker of the House. So right after that happened, and then Henry Clay was named Secretary of State, all of a sudden there's this hue and cry that there was some sort of corrupt bargain struck, that an evil deal was made between John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay, that if Henry Clay's made the Secretary of State, then John Quincy Adams will be guaranteed the win. Well, in looking over the history of this, one finds that there's really no tangible evidence of a corrupt bargain. That the claims that Henry Clay approached Andrew Jackson with an offer that if Jackson makes him Secretary of State, Clay will support Jackson. And when Jackson allegedly stands up and says, "There's no way I will ever do something crooked like that," that then Clay went to Adams, and behind closed doors and in a smoke-filled room, they came up with the plan that, yes, Adams would make Secretary of State out of Henry Clay, and Clay would guarantee the win. There's no evidence for any of that other than the accusations made by people in the camp of Andrew Jackson. Given the fact that there is no real good evidence, and given the idea that Henry Clay didn't really like someone like an Andrew Jackson, thought that people like him should never be president, it's no wonder that he would go for the top candidate as far as he was concerned. If it wasn't going to be him, the next best person would be John Quincy Adams. But because of all of these shenanigans and alleged whatever else, the friends and supporters of Andrew Jackson, led by Representative Martin Van Buren from the state of New York, formed the new Democrat Party, which is the forerunner and precursor and the father of today's Democrat Party. So Democrat Party finds itself tracing its roots all the way back to the 1824 election aftermath. So we have covered a lot of information in these 3 videos. I'm glad you made it through all 3. Next is the Kahoot, which I hope you will find to be fun and an enjoyable way to think through all of these lessons. The main thing to take away in closing is that the reason we have this unusual election is something that probably won't ever happen again. 1, you only have a single party. 2, there were 4 viable candidates. Any one of those men could easily have been elected president. And if there'd been less of them, if only 2 of them had been running, maybe Jackson would have won outright. Maybe Adams would have. It's hard to know. But with so many candidates as viable candidates, the watering down of the election was inevitable. The fact that the candidates were nominated by the state legislatures instead of by the parties and the people of the party gives you maybe candidates that weren't popular to all segments. The fact that with those candidates, there was no electoral majority, which led to a contingent election. So any of those 5 things could cause the election to be crazy and as unusual as this one was, and make it unique in the annals of American history. So, again, thanks for listening, Wildcats, and good luck on the Kahoot.